Hey there YouTube, I go by the name of Kevin Kryptonite and welcome to my channel. Now, video games come in all types of flavors and nowadays, with all the different genres and subgenres, is probably a video game out there that's for you. One of the genres of video games I have a special place in my heart for are indie games. Now, you're probably wondering what an indie game is. In its basic form, indie games are classified as games that are typically developed by a smaller development team or like a handful of individuals, one that doesn't necessarily have huge financial backing. Not like that you would see in the vein of games like God of War or Call of Duty. So that's kind of what separates indie games from AAA games. Anyway, talking about indie games, this brings me to the list and the title of the video, which are 5 indie games that you need to play. Now, number 5, How to Survive. Developed by Eco Software and published by 505 Games, How to Survive is like a top-down perspective survival action horror RPG. Now, as I was discussing when I said tons of genres and types of subgenres, this is what I'm talking about. Like, these games can go in basically any direction based on whatever the developer wants to make. They're kind of art projects. At least that's the way I see them. But I digress. The game, has a story mode. It has a challenge mode. So you can play the entire game in a co-op fashion. The game plot has you like shipwrecked on an island and it's inhabited by zombies, right? The zombies have different archetypes and it can be very dangerous for you to be out at night without any tools. So another one of the mechanics of the game is that being stranded on the island, you need to scavenge, craft, and even buy equipment so that you can survive the night and, more importantly, find out how to get off the island. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, it's a top-down perspective, which is kind of a recurring theme in most indie games. I don't know, maybe as of recent times they're starting to move away from that, but for this specific game, that is the type of gameplay. But it's really fun, like I said, it's an RPG, so you level up when you get better equipment. When you scavenge better equipment, you can craft potions, healing, all of that good stuff. So yeah, man, that's How to Survive. It has a sequel, How to Survive 2 out, so it's done pretty well for itself. Number 4. Now, in the same way that graphics or gameplay mechanics can become associated with like a defining moment for consoles or for gaming, Limbo, for me at least, when this game came out, it gave me an understanding of what indie games can be. It opened up like this whole world of, they don't necessarily have to be these 32 pixel type of games, these top-down perspective type of games. They can really go in a very artistic direction. Limbo was developed by Playdead Studios. It is a puzzle platformer, that's the way that the developer describes it. And it plays like a 2D side scroller, right? So you'll be moving like left and right basically. And it's a platformer, so it's jumping mechanics, physics mechanics. You manipulate objects which also have physics mechanics attached to them. And you'll need to be able to master this so that you can be able to figure out the puzzles and progress in the story. The developers crafted the mechanic that they call trial by death, and that is kind of what you'll get to see from Limbo. There is no tutorial, right? So there is no narration. There is kind of no helping or guiding hand to tell you how to solve a puzzle. You just kind of have to try something, and if it doesn't work, you try something else. And they really kind of deter you from doing the same thing over and over again is that your character dies in some very gruesome ways. But the game has taken the art direction of being completely black and white, with very sporadic colors here. It's completely black and white, and the lighting in it is kind of a driving force that helps narrate everything. Very beautiful game. Has an incredible soundtrack. It's kind of silent for most of it, but it that kind of sets the tone and the mood for it. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say about that. So Limbo is available on all major platforms. As of right now, you can get it basically anywhere. It's also available on iOS and Android. So that's Limbo. Number 3, Transistor. Now, when I think of this game, I remember how all I wanted was to get the soundtrack and have this playing when I fell asleep because it's phenomenal. Um, People have always kind of had a thing for soundtracks, mostly in movies, but it's very rare that you can find somebody who really enjoys a video game soundtrack. But with the type of pull that some of these games have, I can understand why it's getting better and better and better and better for video games. But I digress. Transistor, which was developed by Supergiant Games, it can be played on PS4, Microsoft Windows, and iOS devices. It is a top-down RPG, in which you play as a female protagonist by the name of Red. She is a lounge singer, but she's lost her voice, and her companion is a great sword, which she uses to attack her enemies and progress through the game. The sword can talk. Yes, the sword can talk. Not to spoil too much, but like I said, Red wakes up. Our female protagonist, she wakes up. She doesn't have a voice, and all that's next to her is a dead body and a great sword in it, and the sword starts to talk to her. And it's up to you to find out the mystery of why you've lost your voice. You need to help the sword regain its memories because it can't remember how it got there in the first place either. The sword name is Transistor, so the game is named after the sword. And I guess you can see by the images on the screen that it has a future sci-fi type of feel to it. The gameplay is really unique in that it is turn-based, but turn-based in a way that you have an action meter, right? So whenever you get into combat, you're free to move around, but then your enemies will move around as well. But if you stand still, your enemy stands still, and your action meter starts to deplete. And you use this action meter to do, I guess it says it action. Things like attacking, maneuvering around, using special abilities. It's nothing too unique in that we have seen this in, like the latest Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 15 has that type of mechanic, except that there is no dedicated attack button. In Transistor, you would use your mouse to be able to do your special ability. It's an RPG, like I said, even though the sword is kind of the only thing that you level up. You don't have any other weapon, but there is stats in the way that you can attach transistors to your sword to make it better. This is a really fun game, guys. I highly recommend this one. Supergiant Games did a really dope thing by creating this game, and all the subsequent other games that they have as well kind of have the same feel, like the highly acclaimed, award-winning. I think this one game of the year for sure in the year that it came out. People have been pining for a sequel, but as of now, the developers haven't said anything about making a sequel to it. Number 2, Hades. Now, we're double dipping here, and I'm doing this for a reason because we were just talking about Supergiant Games, and Hades was developed by Supergiant Games, and it's very recent. This came out, I think, 2 years back. Was it last year? I'm not really sure. I don't know why I didn't fact check. I'm too lazy to do it now. Let's move. Anyway, Supergiant Games developed Hades, and it's sort of the same that you've come to expect from Transistor, top-down action RPG. Except there's no turn-based system in this, actually. It's purely an action game. You gain abilities, you use those abilities, you progress. So in Hades, you play as, now let me try not to butcher this name, Zagreus, who's basically the prince of the underworld, and you're trying to escape the underworld and escape your disappointed father, who is Hades. And all of this is in an effort to reach Mount Olympus. And the game is like a roguelike action. So roguelikes are interesting in the mechanic of a video game in that certain areas are restricted to you as you progress through the first time. But then as you continue to gain certain abilities or certain actions, those abilities will allow you to go back and search areas that you previously couldn't because you have this new power or whatever. So to have a roguelike is nothing special, but to implement this into an an indie game, it's a really good idea. The game has a wonderful art system. I like how it's stylized. This is actually voice acted, and it's voice acted really well. They won awards actually, I think, for the voice acting and the art style. Obviously, it won Game of the Year. It was really highly acclaimed. All major review sites, gave it stellar, scoring. So Hades, man, it's the hotness. People are loving it. It's available on the Epic Game Store as well as the Nintendo Switch. So if you get a chance, get your hands on Hades. And finally, number 1, Child of Light. Now look, yes, Child of Light, if you know, is developed by Ubisoft Montreal, and Ubisoft Montreal is not necessarily an indie house. They are definitely AAA. I mean, they made basically every single Assassin's Creed, Saints Row. So yeah, these guys have a lot of money backing them. But the reason why I want to include this into the list, I mean, it hasn't gotten the shine that it deserves, It was definitely one of the smaller overlooked things, especially in a world where every year you're getting a new Assassin's Creed. This tends to get overlooked, and I think it launched around the same time as Assassin's Creed. So why would they stifle, a performance like that? I don't know. But Child of Light, art style, visuals, fantastic, 10 out of 10. Soundtrack, 11 out of 10. Man, it's a really great game. It plays in a way of, the fighting system is sort of Final Fantasy-esque. It's turn-based. There is no timer in this one though. You play as Aurora, and as this character, the plot that brings you along is that you need to solve out basically who killed you. Right? You're the Child of Light, and you come across characters in this fantasy world who will lend you their abilities in battle so that you can solve this mystery, basically. There's not really too much I want to say about this. There is no voice acting in this. It's purely text to speech. Just text, really. If you care enough to read, there's actually a very compelling story that's hidden away in this game, as is basically with most indie games that don't have voice acting or anything. It's just, if you take time, play the game at its own pace, you'll find there's a very charming story behind most of these games. Child of Light can be found on all major platforms available right now, so that's PS3, PS4, Xbox Series X, Xbox One, the drill. You can find it basically anywhere. But with that being said, guys, I think that's the end of the video. That's 5 games indie games that I think that you need to play. I hope at least one of these has piqued your interest, and if they didn't, I might feature them in another list. But until then, I've been Kevin Kryptonite, and I'll see you in the next video.